Hey everyone, welcome to the Smart Economy Podcast, a production of neonewstoday.com. I'm your host, Dylan Grabowski. This episode of the Smart Economy Podcast is part of the inaugural series focusing on decentralized autonomous organizations, better known as DAOs. In episode 2 of the DAO series, I chat with Claude Müller and Guil Machado, senior software engineers at AxLabs. AxLabs is responsible for maintaining Neo3j, a Java-based development toolkit for building dApps and smart contracts in the Neo ecosystem. The AxLabs team also built the GrantShares DAO infrastructure and is currently maintaining the codebase. GrantShares is a DAO comprised of Neo's developer communities that manage a treasury funded by the Neo Foundation, and it is designed to distribute funding to grassroots developers and projects that benefit the ecosystem. In this conversation, Guil, Claude, and I discuss their open source code philosophy, the thought processes that went into the development of the GrantShares DAO, how interested individuals can propose projects for DAO funding, the project proposal lifecycle, and much more. Just a reminder, nothing said on this podcast is a solicitation to buy or sell any tokens, that nothing should be taken as financial advice, and that the host or guests may hold tokens discussed in any given episode. With that said, I really enjoyed chatting with Guil and Claude, and I hope you enjoy the conversation too. Awesome. Well, today we are joined by two members from AxLabs. We have Claude and Guil on the line. How are you guys doing today?
Doing good.
Yeah, great. Great stuff.
Really excited to have you guys on. This is going to be an episode that's part of the recently rebranded Smart Economy Podcast. And we were just talking about the recording about how the new podcast is really going to focus on series and leveraging different voices from multiple different blockchain ecosystems. So while you aren't the first interview for this series, you guys are the first Neo ecosystem folks for the Smart Economy Podcast to talk about DAOs. So before we kind of launch into your experience with DAOs and GrantShares and everything you guys hope to achieve, let's just rewind for a quick second. And for somebody who has never listened to the Neo News Today podcast, or now the Smart Economy Podcast, and has never read any of our articles about you guys, could you just tell new listeners a quick background about who you are and what AxLabs is? And we'll start with you first, Guil, and then we'll ask Claude.
Yeah, sure. So AxLabs is a small company. We are like three guys, and our primary focus is in the blockchain decentralized solutions. We are a bunch of guys which have passion about open source and doing things and building things which are open to the public and that people will use and have fun. Of course, that's the most important thing when building things. Yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed you guys really rely heavily on the Bongo Cat, which is always fun to take a look at. So, Claude, you're not by any means new to the Neo ecosystem. You've been here for a handful of years, and you've been with AxLabs the whole time. But I've never quite got the origin story. So, how did you learn about Neo, and how did you get hooked up with AxLabs? And over the years, what has your role kind of grown into?
Yeah, so I've been with Neo and with AxLabs for almost 3 years, or a bit more than 3 years already. And Guil and I, we met at university when I was still studying. He was already getting into Neo. And I just heard about Neo and other blockchains, of course. I mean, not Neo first. I mean, other blockchains first, probably, like Bitcoin and Ethereum and what have you. And through Guil, I got to know Neo. And yeah, he needed people to help him to develop tools on Neo. Because I mean, he's the idealist. He's always has a vision on how things should be, and really has that idealism that you need probably in the blockchain world to sustain. And so yeah, that pulled me in, and so I've been helping out for the last 3 years, building developer tools with him, and also with Michael, who's our third colleague. And in the beginning, I was just focusing on Neo3j, which is the Bongo Cat that you mentioned, which is our logo for that library or for that SDK. And while developing that library, And now my role went more into like shifted a bit. I'm still maintaining the library, but that work is mostly taken over by Michael now. And I'm focusing more on products actually building on the Neo blockchain, which, for example, GrantShares, which we'll be talking about, of course. And I'm happy that I have more organizational tasks as well now. So it's not only detailed programming; it's also it's a bit more versatile now.
Yeah, very cool. I noticed in recent communications that AxLabs has put out that the GrantShares DAO was built off of the kind of suite of tools and SDKs and libraries you guys have already built over the past few years. So could you maybe just share a little bit, Guil, about kind of the composability or the Lego blocks of the work that you've done and how that allowed you to build GrantShares, which we'll go into in a moment?
Yeah, thanks, Claude, for calling me an idealist. I think I try to be a bit of both, like idealist and like a guy which is very pragmatic in building things. So it seems that I accomplished. So in the beginning, we just built Neo2j. We were in this space of building software for Java and Kotlin developers in the new space, and then we said, okay, we have to build an SDK, and the SDK is something that you can code backends, for example, to interact with the new blockchain. And then after shipping this, still in the new legacy, in the previous version of the new blockchain, we realized, okay, we can do a bit more. Why we don't do a compiler, which is basically a software where you can write smart contracts, and then writing smart contracts, compiling them, being written in Java, and then deploying in the new blockchain. So we say, okay, let's do it. And then that's when we said we basically focus on a Java compiler for the Neo N3 blockchain, which is the new version of Neo, the evolution of Neo. Okay, so then we were pretty happy with the results. The community we got attention from the community. People started using it from the first hackathon last year. And then we start talking within our community on like maybe doing another project that we could use Neo2j, the SDK and a compiler and all our knowledge of Neo to build something with it. So adapt. And then that's basically our goal is to eat our own dog food. So in the end, like me and Claude say, man, we should be pretty excited doing this because we started like really low level from really doing a compiler, an SDK, and then going to the application layer, and then using all our libraries, all the stuff that we built to do something meaningful for the end users out there.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's like you built all these tools and then you decided it's time to put the work that you'd put into the test. And what a hefty test that your previous experience was put towards, because when the idea for GrantShares was floated, your team was voluntold, or the task was landed onto your plate. So I guess just a brief preview before we go into details. GrantShares is a DAO that will be distributing funding that is initially seeded by the Neo Foundation for grassroots developers to apply to, and a series of individuals from the Neo community will vote on these proposals. And for anyone who's been in the Neo ecosystem for a handful of years, you'll recognize these communities that will vote on the proposals, like COZ, Neo News Today, AxLabs, Neo Foundation, NGD Enterprise, Next, Red for Sec, Neo SPCC. Sorry if I'm forgetting any other communities, but I'm just trying to highlight that these are individuals that people from the community might know. Now, before we go into more specifics about GrantShares, this is a series on DAOs, and I want the listener to walk away after listening to these episodes on this series, having a good understanding of what DAOs are. And DAOs are kind of like art. You can't define it, but you can say what it is when you see it. So I kind of want to pull your guys' ears because you've done a lot of research in this realm after you were tasked with building GrantShares last summer. So I don't know which one of you want to start first, but basically, can you just tell me what your definition of a DAO is?
So DAO, what is DAO? Like, what is acronym of DAO? Is decentralized autonomous organization. And then, like in my perception, in my definition, using my own words, a DAO it's basically an entity which is have a purpose and should have some governance attached to it. Of course, should have this. The purpose maybe should attach to incentives, like either financial or non-financial. And then this entity will be how can I say organized in the decentralized way through this governance and through these incentives and the purpose. So this whole phenomenon it just started in like deploying a smart contract where you could create proposals in the smart contract. And then the proposal can be executed and enforced in the smart contract. So this is like a kind of a summary of what is DAO and what it composes DAO. But of course, you can extrapolate on this and then go to the real world and how DAOs are organized. And maybe you're going to bring some other folks here in this DAO series to talk about that in more detail. But that's what I have, like the definition that I have in mind. I don't know if you want to complement, Claude.
Yeah, I would pick up where we left off with the word purpose, where I think that DAOs are an organization that form around a purpose of a community. So it's about collaboration, and this is the broadest definition that you can give. Like every organization probably forms around some purpose where collaboration is needed to get there. And that I would stick to that definition where a DAO is an organization for collaboration, for people, or for coordinating these people to reach a common goal. And usually, like let's say in the old world, this often requires a lot of trust into each other. Either you're a community that lives in the same location, and so you know everybody, and that's why you trust each other. Or you have some middlemen that help you so that you don't actually need trust between yourself and other people of your organization that you maybe don't see regularly or you never actually get to know, but you still kind of try to work together to a common goal. And with the DAO, I think the advantage of the DAO would be then that you can remove this necessary trust not with every community that has like certain goals there. You just kind of need a lot of work, a lot of interaction with other people, where you cannot rely totally on code and automation. But I think DAOs can add a lot to helping organizations getting improving their collaboration.
Yeah, I think something that's really interesting is the concept of DAOs aren't necessarily new. It's just the technology. Like if you look at America's foundings, people were escaping religious persecution and they organized as a group and decided to move to a new country. So you've had these ideas of communities forming based off of idealism and acting on that idealism for centuries now, maybe even all of humanity, if like you start talking about hunting and gathering and why people would collect because they needed to get food to survive. So really, in my perspective, what the unique thing that DAOs are bringing is it's just now this technology layer where you can disintermediate or remove the centralized figure. So I'm wondering if in your research, what are some examples of DAOs that you guys came across? Because there's so many types out there. This isn't just a one size solution fits all. So could you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so just before going to the examples, I think that's I don't know if I've said that before, but this is an unpopular opinion that I have, which is basically we already live in our society, in democratic societies, in a DAO, but without the ledger, the technology powering it. So it's this is really interesting, and it goes along the lines of what you said, Dylan. But I mean, going to examples, yeah, there are quite a few. So, for example, Gitcoin DAO is a good example, but there are others which started this whole phenomena of DAO, and nowadays you don't talk about them so much. For example, it's MakerDAO. So I think, like I said the other day, that I like to listen to guys when they're speakers in conferences from these DAOs, which are a bit older, because they have like real problems to deal with in the real world. So a typical example will be, okay, so you have a DAO, you form a DAO, you have like all the members, but they have like smart contract, they have their treasury and voting proposals, enforcing the proposals, etc. But besides the DAO, you have to interface with the real world, and then you need to have a domain name, and who should be the owner of that domain name, and what's the how you solve that? You're going to centralize to one person. So well, I'm going a bit out of the topic here, but examples are like MakerDAO, Gitcoin DAO, GrantShares, of course, but we're going to talk later about it. Can you help me, Claude?
Well, I would go into more abstract direction instead of naming like examples, like concrete examples. I'd start with what kinds of DAOs we have, where I see that the most common kind of DAO is one that is used for funding things. So, I mean, the MakerDAO was also one of those. And one prominent one is the Moloch DAO. You probably know that one. That was also made for, it's kind of for investing into projects in the crypto space. So many DAOs, or probably many early DAOs, were only focusing on that, where it was about how can you collect money in an organization and then distribute it according to the organization's wishes, basically. That's pretty, it's still easy cases where you only have to decide where money is going, and you can put money into the DAO and you can take money out of it. And you decide via proposals where that money should go. But then if you want to mimic a whole organization, like an organization like NGD or Google even, which is probably a bit too big to start with now, but still like a normal company, then you need total new mechanisms that are not part of these funding DAOs that we have seen so far. And like, it's a pity I haven't looked into more complex DAOs yet. Like, I guess Shapeshift, for example, is one of those. And there you need much more, like you need to somehow define rules for all the interactions that the people of the DAO can have. So all this collaboration that can happen inside of the organization needs to be written down into rules. And well, we don't know if that's possible for all the interactions. And if it's even necessary, maybe you also needs a kind of, or a type of person to work in these DAOs so that the DAO actually works seamlessly. Or you just need to shift like culture a bit such that people get adapted to this new concept where everybody's pretty much self-managing, or groups are self-managing themselves, even though they're part of a bigger organization, but they don't have to be managed by one overseer of the organization as it is in older companies and old structures.
Yeah, the reason I ask is because you guys have done a lot more research. Despite the fact that I've been writing about Neo for 4 years and been in the blockchain space, like I still feel as if I know very little about DAOs. From my angle and my perspective, they seem to be mostly treasury focused. So, a lot of people contribute a cryptocurrency, and then the amount of cryptocurrency they contributed to the DAO determines what their stake for a vote is. And so with some DAOs, you are funding open source developers who are making proposals for funds similar to what GrantShares and what Moloch DAO does. But then you have MakerDAO, which is one of the OGs, one of the first ones that's been around, and they're focusing on managing their treasury because there's a stable coin that's associated with that project. But then you also have, and this really happened last year, the new emergence of kind of idealism focused DAOs. And I'm talking about like Constitution DAO, which was a group of people who put together a bunch of funding to buy one of the only privately held physical copies of the US Constitution. They ended up losing to some rich millionaire, centralized entity, but it really highlighted that a group of people can come together behind an idealistic vision, which was also something that I found interesting in what you were saying, Guil, because to put together a team for a live auction, you need to have legal experts, you need to have people on the ground, you need to have individuals who know how to operate inside these traditional realms. So you have this weird like marriage of figuring out how to incorporate these decentralized anons who are voting with their cryptocurrencies, but then also deciding who to put your trust into to carry out the vision of the DAO. So it's kind of interesting that, and this is only a year old, Constitution DAO, Pleaser DAO is another one that purchases artwork based on a philosophy, on an idealism. So I don't think there's a real answer yet for like what are the different types of DAOs out there. But you guys were tasked with building the GrantShares DAO. So before we go into GrantShares, and other than just funding developers, what are some opportunities that DAOs can bring to this world?
I mean, as I said, like you have many types of DAOs. One example that AxLabs was recently involved by working in doing some coding and organizing things for it is one of one DAO. So 101.fun and 101.works. So basically, it's an NFT DAO. It's a smart contract where there are many members in this DAO, and then we decide which NFTs we will buy, we acquire, which ones are going to sell it, put it into sale. And the structure of this DAO, for example, is that you hire specialized people on going and evaluating NFTs, checking and basically working for the DAO. And then of course they should be rewarded and all stuff. I mean, 101 is being developed. Is AxLabs is not the primarily driver of this, of course, is Dialectic, but we were there like in part in the beginning, and I think it's a good example of things that goes outside of just grants or deciding how the treasury should look like, etc. I mean, there are other things like ENS. ENS is also a good example of a DAO, which goes a bit away, because then you can have proposals and you can delegate your vote to other people from the ENS, the Ethereum name service community, to decide on, I don't know, configurations of ENS, adding maybe second level domains, and these kind of things. I'm not so much into it, but I have a bunch of ENS tokens, of course, and then I once in a while I check what the guys are doing there. But then there's another example, which is basically Radical, which is a very interesting project. I don't know so much about them. I'm a bit exposed on Radical, but Radical is building communities or like DAOs, which you can form open source projects. The development is transparent, the code is transparent, but also the projects should be transparent in a DAO and decentralized. So there you can create sub DAOs. I think representing, if I'm not mistaken, representing like open source projects, and then people can work in this open source project, etc. I mean, I'm not so into it. I'm just talking here by what I've got in the conference from the past and all that stuff. But I remember that Claude was in the same conference, and I think it was ECC in the past. And I mean, both of us were really impressed with Radical and the DAO, what they've built.
Yeah, I mean, everything is so nascent. So even just the folks you've talked to or the white papers you've read or anything like that is super helpful, because you're now the de facto experts for DAOs in the Neo ecosystem. So AxLabs built the infrastructure for GrantShares. Before we kind of get into like the details for the code and the architecture and all that, I guess maybe you can tell our audience a little bit about, in your words, what GrantShares is, and when did you guys start working on the architecture? And this can even go dating back to the first bit of research you started.
Yeah, so GrantShares is following in the footsteps of the already existing Neo eco-support programs, where Neo has funds set up to spend grants on projects or on teams, on research and so on. But there it's pretty centralized in the sense that the NEO Foundation has a say on where these funds go, right? And it's a bit intransparent, I would say, for us, for the long-term community members who don't see the proposals that are sent to these grant programs. And so the idea with GrantShares is to have a more transparent and a more decentralized grants program. So GrantShares is basically a grants program, as it is in the name, obviously. And well, of course, it makes sense then to use our tools and to use the NEO blockchain to build this on a blockchain and to build it as a decentralized organization.
And when did you guys start working on GrantShares? Because these types of things don't happen overnight. So could you just, it's like an iceberg. You know, we only see the tip of the iceberg, but there was a lot of work that went into this. So could you just share a little bit about when you started researching for the architecture and kind of like what the process was like getting to here?
Yeah, so Guil, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we started in October, or was it even earlier? Yeah, it was like October. And we started with the architecture there. And there we had a lot of discussions going on. And we already tried to involve as many community members as possible, especially from the long-term community members like COZ and NNT and these parties. And then we already realized how things probably take a bit longer. Yeah, if you try to do it decentralized from the beginning and try to have many opinions on it. And then at some point, it kind of became clear to us that you cannot discuss it forever. You just, at some point, you don't know in theory how it's going to work out, if the incentives are correctly, if we need more security and other features of the DAO. And then so we just decided to go ahead and implement and then try it out. And that's where we're at. I mean, since then, we've been designing and towards the end of the year, we started implementing. And yeah, maybe Guil, you have something to say about this?
Yeah, that's exactly. I was going to interrupt, but I could hold myself for telling more about this. Yeah, that's exactly how it happened, because this pragmatic approach that we took is, I think, what is one of the success factors that we expect to have, because we have to start. That's the important thing. We have to start. And then, like when I was discussing in the endless discussions with Claude about, who will be the members of this DAO? Like, should we have like the community as members? Should we have a token to represent the decision power, and then like voting based on tokens? How we should do it? And then like we just let's take a rather more conservative approach in the beginning. Because this is an experiment, guys. Like, is not doesn't mean that just because you have like thousands of DAOs out there that your DAO you're going to make it right and everything will be beautiful and people are going to use it. So we decided let's go step by step, more conservative, having a set of community members which already know the new ecosystem to make the decision power of this DAO. And then maybe in future, we're gonna talk about this, but maybe in future we're gonna add other tranches of decision power to go with it, and having a token maybe or whatever. So yeah, that's basically how it evolved over time. But just to complete my line of thought, my line of thinking is GrantShares basically is also to give more agility. I know that having a DAO doesn't always mean to have agility in the ecosystem, because you have like the proposal, you have the voting period, and it takes weeks. But getting all these people and say, go there to our website, make a proposal, and let's do it.
So historically, if like a grassroots level developer wanted to apply for funding in the NEO ecosystem, they would have to go to NEO Foundation. And there are issues associated with applying for funding from a centralized entity. You're mostly on their timeline, and you hinted and alluded to this, Claude, that there's a lack of transparency simply because the decision making is being made behind a walled garden. So what are some of the constraints that DAOs will have if somebody's applying for funding? Like, there's always a trade-off, for everything good, there's always something bad that comes. And so what's good with this is that the community can choose to support grassroots developers, which is a positive. But if we want to be realistic, what are some like perceived constraints that you guys envision will be attached with GrantShares as people apply for funding?
Could just implement protective mechanisms that ward off people from flooding the system.
Do you envision that there are any sort of issues with like puppet accounts being created or Sybil attacks? Is this something that you're concerned about or you've seen in other DAOs?
Obviously, it is a concern, but there's no gain for the proposer in that. You know, it will cost something. I mean, you still have to pay gas fees, so it's not for free. And we can quickly implement small mechanisms that can ward off the easiest attacks if we want to. And so that's one point where we decided we'll just go and see how it works out. How tough is the world actually? And we'll see on lunch how that is.
Yeah, just correct me, Claude, or just complement my answer that I think that the endorse mechanism that we built around GrantShares is one of the mechanisms to filter or to prevent Sybil attacks in a larger scale, because the situation is nowadays, let me explain to the audience that GrantShares, we decided to go like from a non-complex kind of DAO and then evolve over time. So what I mean with that? We have now a set of members that these members will take part on voting in deciding if a proposal should pass or not. This proposal can be of any kind. It's not only a proposal to a request for funding, but it can be a proposal for add a new member to the DAO, or to remove a member from the DAO, or to whitelist a token in the treasury, or to release some money from the treasury to somewhere else. So the proposals are kind of like generic, and in this one of the is kind of like this initial set of members will have the power to vote and do it. But another function of these members is to endorse. When a proposal just comes on the table and comes to the DAO, at least one member should endorse it. Otherwise, the proposal will not go on this life cycle. So the voting will not going to happen if the proposal is not endorsed by AxLabs or COZ or NNT. So this is one of mechanisms that we can block and filter, Sybil attacks and this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The more we get into these kind of new models that blockchain is empowering, the more I realize that we go back to this term that others have coined, layer zero, which is the social element of the people that are participating in these networks. And I think sometimes it can be easy to forget about this because we get so excited about the tech and the code. But ultimately, we're just creating tools for people to communicate, collaborate, and create and make decisions together. So that's really interesting that you guys kind of thought about this, and the ability for a voting member to kind of approve a proposal before it gets voted on is interesting because it relies on somebody caring enough to read through the proposal and then saying, hey, you guys should vote on this. But secondly, it also acts as like a level of vetting the project so that if you do have all these Sybil attacks of just nonsense projects, you can just have somebody who has an hour free go through and say that, we're not going to support this project. So we've kind of talked a little bit about the infrastructure and the research that you guys have done on GrantShares and how GrantShares is going to be a funding mechanism for grassroots developers. Could you just tell us a little bit about the process of what this looks like? What does the walkthrough look like? So let's say I want to have Bitcoin added to the treasury and I want to propose this. What's this going to look like for me making this proposal?
Well, it's not there yet, but there's going to be a DApp page, of course. So the GrantShares DApp will be your central point of interaction for this. It starts with creating proposals. So like we said before, the entry barrier should be low. So one of the major pages of the DApp is creating a proposal. And we wanted to make it even free at the beginning, where you can create a proposal without having to pay gas. So you will first, when you create a proposal, you will only generate a discussion somewhere, like somewhere being GitHub in the case of GrantShares. We will create a discussion issue for you, and that's where the discussion happens. So your proposal first doesn't sit on chain; it sits on GitHub, and that's where you have to start and get the GrantShares members intrigued, and also other community members. Like anybody can take part in the discussion, of course. But we wanted to have a discussion platform that's a bit more structured than just having a Discord server for this stuff. And from there, like Guil said, you have the endorsement mechanism. So if you just create bullshit proposals that nobody wants, it will just expire after some time without anybody endorsing it. And then your proposal is useless. And after you found like people or GrantShares members are interested in your proposal, you can create it on chain if you want it. Like anybody could create it on chain. But why, the one who created the discussion in the first place probably is interested in creating it on chain. And this then kicks off the process on chain, still all happening through the DApp, of course. You don't have to go and create commands through the command line or anything. And then the proposal is endorsed by a GrantShares member. This kicks off the voting phase. If you get enough votes from the members, then your proposal passes. You just have to wait a little while after it passes, after the voting phase, before you can execute it. And so at the moment, like we intend to set this time for 7 days of voting phase and then 3 days of a Timelock phase until you can actually execute a proposal.
And I don't mean to interrupt, but why did you guys add a time lock after the proposal's been approved? That's something that's interesting.
Yeah, this is just because we chickened out of not doing it. It's basically a security mechanism to have a period where once things get serious because a proposal has been accepted, and once you execute the proposal, the things that happen through the proposal, like the actions that are taken through the proposal, they're encoded in the proposal. It's not just okay, yeah, we voted yes. Now let's do something manually. It's okay, everybody voted yes, and now this is executed automatically. And so that's why we have this Timelock phase where the GrantShares members still have time to wake up and see, holy shit, this is going to break everything. And then they have time to pause the contract basically. And then the proposal cannot be executed. It's like worst case scenario.
No, exactly. It's also in other DAOs, you also have this Timelock phase because, for example, on other DAOs where it's about DeFi or whatever, you can sell your tokens. You can, if you are part of the decision power of this DAO and you're not satisfied by the decision that was made, I mean, maybe you abstain in the vote, or maybe you vote no against it. So you have like a bit of time to leave the DAO. So it's not only a security mechanism, as Claude was mentioning. I think, this is something that you give an equal opportunity for all of them to get used to the decision that it was taken.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's not something that you think about when people think like, oh, a smart contract and the decision's made instantly. But when things come to funding, it's nice to have kind of that fail-safe in case like somebody does act in a malicious manner to get more funding than they had initially proposed. I'm not sure what that would look like on the back end. So I can't really kind of pull that thread a little bit more, but something that you did mention earlier was aggregating conversations in a way that's easier to follow along. And this is only the second conversation I've had on DAOs, but this is a theme that has carried over from from the previous conversation I had. So this is great that you have this entity where people can communicate on GitHub, but there's also got to be an easier way for people to speak in an informal manner. So I kind of have two questions. A, is the conversations that are held on GitHub, is that metadata going to be stored in the hash associated with the proposal so that people can scour an explorer and find this proposal and then go back to the conversations? And then B, are there any plans to create an informal chat server for people to talk about proposals?
So the first question, if the discussion is available through the on-chain proposal, the answer is yes. So, I mean, obviously the two things are linked. The on-chain proposal is linked to the off-chain discussion, but of course, we know that GitHub, the discussion that happens on GitHub that's like a decentralized, that's a centralized service. So if GitHub goes and deletes all the discussion, then we don't have that data anymore. So if we wanted to have more control or like decentralized control over that, over the discussion data, then we would have to copy it, to NeoFS would be the first thing to do, of course. But yeah, these things are linked. The discussion is linked to the proposal in the on-chain proposal. And for the second question, at the moment, we were not planning to have an unstructured discussion somewhere, because like that goes into the direction what I was saying before, where the concern in such DAOs is that you don't have enough. I don't find a word. That people don't take part. And if you have multiple channels where things are going on, then I think much information, when people already have problems with their attention anyway, I mean, myself as well, my attention goes in so many places, and I'm always trying to manage my attention better. And so I think we should try to only have one channel actually for this discussion, where people can focus on and don't need to worry about lost information somewhere else.
Yeah, voting is one of those things that it's almost impossible to get people to do, but then the decision, it makes everybody upset afterwards. I try not to get too political, but this became very apparent to me after Trump got elected in America. Less than 50% of the population voted, but during that time frame, it felt like almost everyone had an opinion. So you have this issue where voting is really important, but people don't participate in it. And then afterwards, they have a lot of opinions about it, but they had a chance to kind of participate in the early matters. So that's kind of a wicked problem. I remember talking about that at the Neo Community Assembly in 2019. This does not seem to have been something that changes over time. It seems like it's human nature.
This is part of the developments in the DAO world, that having a good medium for the discussion is one of the most important things, I think. And there are projects that are trying to create tooling for that. I forgot the names right now, but where you basically try to extract the intentions of the community, of lots of comments, and you try to extract some fundamental, couple of sentences or something, that the sentiment of the community out of a huge discussion, and trying to thereby come up with maybe a yes or a no sentiment, or even multiple cases. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the project that you're trying to remember the name, Claude, is the name is Voxiberate. Voxiberate.com. So me and Claude, we even met some time ago with Lily, one of the founder of this project, and basically they have a lot of experience on deliberation in the European Union and this kind of thing, and they would like to establish a tool where you could better communicate and make decisions on in a chat or in written format. One of the reasons for this is that all the tools that you have now, GitHub or Discord or Slack or name it, Telegram, they're not meant to be for decision making and for the communities in a structured way, etc. So, yeah, we were talking with Voxiberate, to be really honest, to see if they could maybe fit as a DApp or go to the new ecosystem to also help us. But I mean, these talks are ongoing. Let's see how it goes. But I mean, yeah. So just as a summary, you have the off-chain and on-chain discussions and things. But the off-chain, talking specifically about GrantShares, we decided on going GitHub because GitHub is where developers are or the builders are, and it's well known. And I think this is a start. Well, we're not saying that we always will remain there, but this is a good start. And we try to we even developed a GitHub bot, to help in these discussions of GrantShares, where the bot will post, oh, this is the proposal. These are the intents of the proposal. This is the encoded transaction that will be made if the proposal will be executed, let's say. And the bot also will let people know, oh, someone endorsed this proposal, or yeah, guys, look, this proposal is stalled. Like nobody's discussing for 5 days, but it's already endorsed. Can you please discuss this kind of like things, which helps in the whole off-chain process.
Awesome. I'm cognizant of everyone's time, so I only have a couple more questions. Something I did want to pull on though. So GrantShares is for anyone to apply for. The funding limit currently is $50,000 in applications. So if you're a developer or a marketer, or you're starting a business that's going to integrate Neo, and you're still at kind of like that smaller scale grassroots level, this is the perfect avenue to go through. If you have a larger scope, then obviously you want to speak with Neo Foundation. So that's who GrantShares is for. But another thing I wanted to pull on from your guys' ears is the composability of the architecture that you created. So what were some of the considerations that you guys had thinking about people who might integrate the architecture and the code of the GrantShares DAO into their dApps or into their DAOs moving forward? So what do you guys envision others using your open source code for other projects moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, we started implementing this not only with GrantShares in mind. I think the contracts are a bit more generic. For example, like a proposal can be anything. A proposal can not only be whatever actions the GrantShares contracts support, but you can call anything that lives on the blockchain with a proposal, and you can do multiple calls. You could do swaps into different chains and things like that. And so that's where we hope that the GrantShares smart contracts and that the infrastructure we built can be reused by other people. And of course, if we had more time, I would like to even unpack the contracts more and like get out features into separate contracts and kind of have even a more modular architecture that people could use already, like maybe deploy some features on chain and they can be used by different projects using the same kind of library code on chain, helping them to vote, deploying different voting strategies, for example, that people don't have to put that stuff in their own contracts. Much more could be done in that direction, and GrantShares is just as it is now, just the first step.
Yeah, we have to hold ourselves a bit on, because we have so many ideas and so many things that we could do and make things generic and for other use cases. But then we say, okay, let's stop it here. Let's solve one problem at a time. And but I think it's already modular, but not super modular. Let's put it this way. I think one of the things that people might look at is our two contracts. We have a governance contract and we have a treasury contract, and those are being audited as we speak. And this is a really good sign, because when you have a code which is audited and people have many eyes on it in deploying production, people could take this and fork it and could do their modify a bit, and then do their own DAOs in the new ecosystem, for example, or take this model and go to other ecosystems, no problem. It's already generic. Of course, we can do way more, but for now, we envisage that people will fork it and adapt, and then the whole ecosystem will progress over time.
Awesome. I want to wrap up this conversation by asking a question that I plan on asking every guest who joins the podcast. What does the smart economy mean to you?
To me, it means more efficient allocation of funds. And can I make something else up? No, I'll leave it with that. You see, I always talk about efficiency, and efficiency also applies to politics. So when it's about voting, that can also be more efficient, meaning also including or not excluding certain groups. These kind of things.
I think we share the same, Claude. Efficiency is a point there, but smart economy to me is something that we should have in our society already. But sometimes, in most of the countries and the democracies that we live, we don't have. But is to have an economy for the common good. That the common good for everyone, it's something that people progress as a whole. I know that this is very idealistic to say it like this, and oh, maybe this doesn't happen like always, and we live in a capitalism, and I understand that. But ultimately, we have to care about others in our community, so we have to progress together.
I don't think that there's a wrong answer, because the smart economy could be digitizing assets to creating more efficient ways for voting to happen. So that's kind of why I want to end each interview on such a broad question, because it kind of helps highlight the way that different people think about issues. So I want to thank you guys a ton for joining the first series of the newly revamped Smart Economy podcast to talk about DAOs and to share your experience with GrantShares and to help others learn a little bit more about how they can expect to interact with GrantShares, and for developers to learn how they can integrate the code into their future dApps. So thanks a lot for all the hard work that you guys have done. Sometimes I know it can feel thankless, especially with like anons demanding things online. But it's really cool to see this infrastructure land on Neo. And I'm really excited to have been able to talk to you guys to share a little bit more about that.
Thanks, Dylan. Thanks a lot for this conversation. And I would just ask the audience to go to GrantShares.io and please sign up there, and that you can stay tuned for what will come next. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to chatting with you guys soon. And until then, have a good one. Well, what did you think of that conversation? I thought it was really interesting to hear about the lifecycle process of proposing a project to the GrantShares DAO, from inception to the distribution of funding. I'm really looking forward to following along the upcoming GitHub conversations for future proposals. And future grant seekers should keep an eye out for the upcoming launch of the GrantShares DApp. With that, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to listen to the Smart Economy podcast. If you liked what you heard and want to support the show, please keep Neo News Today in mind when voting for your Neo Council representative as part of Neo's governance process. We appreciate you, and we look forward to catching you next time.